The room went silent. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward as if history itself was about to whisper something unforgettable. And then, Donald Trump, with that familiar smirk stretched across his face, dropped a political grenade. After talking with Zelensky, he declared, "I believe Kyiv can take back all of Ukraine." The words cut through the air like thunder. For a man known for bold claims, this one was beyond bold. It was seismic. A statement that instantly rippled across Washington, Moscow, Kyiv, and every newsroom in the world. Could Trump really be saying that Ukraine, battered by years of brutal war, had the strength to reclaim everything it lost? This wasn't just another headline. It was a dare, a challenge, a narrative twist no one saw coming. Some gasped in disbelief. Some cheered. Others shook their heads in shock. Because if Trump was right, then the entire balance of power in Eastern Europe, and perhaps the fate of the world, was about to shift. And that's where this story begins. A meeting that was supposed to be routine suddenly transformed into a stage for a global bombshell. But the question remains, was this a genius prediction, reckless bravado, or a calculated move in the political chessboard of 2024? Buckle up, because what we're about to uncover is not just politics. It's drama. It's theater. It's the kind of moment that makes history. The meeting itself wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. Just another closed-door conversation between two men at the center of the world's most dangerous conflict. But when Trump and Zelensky sat down face-to-face, sparks were inevitable. Imagine the scene. Zelensky, the wartime president, still carrying the weight of his nation on his shoulders, his green military-style outfit, his sharp gaze, his tone a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. Across from him, Donald Trump, the larger-than-life former U.S. president, dressed sharp, leaning back in his chair, exuding the confidence of a man who thrives in chaos. Two very different worlds colliding in a single room. Sources say the conversation began with the usual formalities: updates on the battlefield, discussions of international aid, and the ongoing stalemate with Russia. But then Trump, in his trademark style, cut straight to the core. He wasn't interested in excuses, delays, or diplomatic jargon. He wanted a headline moment, and that's when he said it. If you play it right, Kyiv can take it all back. Every inch, every city, every piece of Ukraine that Russia claims, it can all return under your flag. For Zelensky, the words must have been both electrifying and dangerous. Electrifying, because here was a former American president publicly planting a flag of confidence in Ukraine's full victory. Dangerous, because such a statement could escalate tensions, provoke Russia, and shake up global alliances. Trump didn't stop there. He reportedly went on to hint that the war wasn't just about territory. It was about willpower, about image, about proving who had the stamina to outlast the other. In Trump's mind, wars aren't just fought with weapons, but with perception. And perception, as he has shown throughout his career, is something he knows how to manipulate better than almost anyone. To some, his statement was pure theater. Another grand Trumpian exaggeration meant to dominate headlines. To others, it was a chilling forecast. If Trump believed Ukraine could win it all, perhaps he would push policies that forced such an outcome if he ever returned to power. One thing was clear. The boldness of the claim guaranteed it wouldn't be forgotten. Within hours, it was on every news ticker, every social feed, every late-night political debate. Trump had once again thrown gasoline on the global fire. The ripple effect was immediate. Within minutes of Trump's statement, reactions began flooding in from every corner of the political world. The bold claim wasn't just words. It was a spark that lit fires in Washington, Kyiv, and Moscow. In the United States, the political divide split wide open. Trump's supporters hailed his words as visionary. Conservative commentators declared that only Trump had the guts to say what others whispered in private, that Ukraine's fight wasn't hopeless and that complete victory was still possible. "This is leadership," one pro-Trump pundit boomed on live television. "This is a man who sees the end game while Biden and the Democrats are stuck playing small ball." But his critics wasted no time tearing him apart. Reckless, screamed headlines in left-leaning outlets. Dangerous political theater, said Democratic lawmakers, accusing Trump of playing with fire. To them, his words weren't inspiration, they were instability, a gamble that could embolden Ukraine to overextend itself or provoke Russia into escalating the war even further. In Ukraine, the reaction was more complicated. Zelensky himself remained measured, carefully balancing optimism with caution. Ukraine will fight for every inch of its land, he told reporters, stopping short of directly echoing Trump's claim. For the Ukrainian people, Trump's words carried a strange power. On one hand, they offered hope, proof that some in the West still believed total victory was possible. On the other hand, they raised dangerous expectations. Could Ukraine really reclaim every city, every occupied territory? And if not, would Trump's words someday be used as a weapon against them? And then came Russia. The Kremlin responded with icy contempt. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesman, mocked Trump's claim as empty rhetoric from a man seeking headlines. Russian state media laughed off the idea that Ukraine could ever take back its lost lands, framing Trump's statement as proof of American arrogance. Yet behind the laughter was unease. Because if Trump was hinting at a future U.S. policy that aggressively backed Ukraine, then Moscow knew the stakes had just changed. Internationally, NATO allies watched with raised eyebrows. Some quietly welcomed the morale boost for Ukraine. Others feared Trump's words could destabilize delicate diplomatic efforts already underway. The message was clear. One sentence from Trump had created waves that no government could ignore. This was no longer just about a private conversation. It had become a global echo, loud, divisive, and impossible to silence. The stage was set. Not in a courtroom, not in a campaign rally, but in the court of public opinion, where words echo louder than bullets. Trump's declaration became the spark of a fierce, theatrical debate that played out across TV panels, podcasts, and social media timelines. On one side sat the loyalists, Trump's diehard supporters, their voices sharp and confident. Finally, one of them shouted during a heated debate, a leader who doesn't just mumble about negotiations and compromises. Trump is saying what the world needs to hear, that Ukraine can win, not just survive, but actually win back everything. That's courage. That's vision. The crowd of supporters roared. To them, Trump's words weren't reckless. They were a rallying cry. Proof that only he, not Biden, not NATO bureaucrats, dared to believe in complete victory. Trump doesn't play small, another voice chimed in. He thinks big, he moves big, and he inspires big. That's why people listen. But the other side wasn't silent. Critics fired back with cutting precision. This isn't vision, one Democratic strategist sneered. It's delusion. Wars aren't won with slogans. Wars are won with strategy, alliances, logistics, and blood. Trump is tossing gasoline into a fire that's already burning too hot. And you call that leadership? The debate escalated into a clash of worldviews. Supporters painted Trump as the bold truth-teller, the man unafraid to say the unsayable. Critics cast him as a reckless gambler, playing politics with lives at stake. Each side shouted louder, each side convinced they had history on their side. On television, anchors struggled to keep control of their panels as guests yelled over one another. On social media, hashtags exploded. Trump was right, reckless, Trump, Ukraine victory. Memes, videos, and fiery threads flooded timelines. The digital battlefield was as fierce as the one being fought in Eastern Europe. And that was the brilliance, or the danger, of Trump's bombshell. It wasn't just about Ukraine anymore. It was about Trump himself, about his power to divide, to dominate, to force the world into his orbit. Every supporter who cheered, every critic who fumed, whether they admitted it or not, was dancing to Trump's tune. Because love him or hate him, one truth became undeniable. Donald Trump had once again turned global conflict into his personal stage. The echo of Trump's words wasn't confined to Kyiv or Moscow. It reverberated straight into the heart of the 2024 U.S. presidential race. For Trump, every statement is a calculation, every soundbite a weapon. And this one, It was a missile aimed directly at the narrative Joe Biden and the Democrats have carefully built around Ukraine. Biden's team has painted him as the steady hand, the defender of democracy, the leader who unites NATO against Russian aggression. But with a single bold line, Trump reframed the conversation. Suddenly, Biden's measured approach looked cautious. Too cautious, while Trump's declaration sounded daring, even heroic to those hungry for strength. It was classic political theater. Turn the tables, rewrite the script, and make your opponent look small. But there's risk in every gamble. By promising total victory, Trump raised the stakes sky high. If Ukraine falters, critics will say he sold false hope. If the war drags on, they'll call his words reckless bravado. Yet Trump has never played the safe game. His strategy has always been to dominate headlines, control the narrative, and let the world argue about him. And in that sense, mission accomplished. The impact wasn't limited to U.S. politics. NATO allies found themselves in a tricky position. Many European leaders privately wondered, what happens if Trump returns to the White House? Would he double down on this claim and pressure NATO to push harder against Russia? Or would he use it as leverage, demanding concessions from both sides to craft a deal only he could claim credit for? Meanwhile, in Moscow, strategists were forced to consider a chilling possibility: that Trump's words weren't just rhetoric, but a preview of future U.S. policy. If the world's most powerful military openly embraced the goal of Ukraine reclaiming all its territory, Russia's long-term strategy could collapse overnight. Putin thrives on dividing the West, but Trump's unpredictability introduced a new kind of uncertainty. And in Kyiv, for Zelensky, Trump's declaration was both a blessing and a curse. It energized morale, showing that a major Western figure believed in Ukraine's ultimate victory. But it also added pressure, because if Trump's prediction fails, critics will say Ukraine squandered its chance, and Zelensky will carry the weight of expectations he never fully endorsed. The message was clear. This wasn't just about Ukraine's borders. It was about America's elections, NATO's unity, Russia's survival, and the fragile balance of global power. One statement, one claim, had set the stage for consequences far beyond the battlefield. And so here we are. One sentence, one bold declaration, one man turning the entire global conversation upside down. Donald Trump's claim that Kyiv can take back all of Ukraine wasn't just a prediction. It was a performance, a challenge, a spark that set the world arguing. But here's the real question. Was it vision, or was it theater? Was Trump glimpsing a future no one else dares to imagine? Or was he playing his oldest game, pulling the spotlight back to himself while the world burns? Think about what's at stake. If Ukraine does reclaim everything, Trump will look like the man who called it first, a prophet of victory. If they fail, his critics will slam him as reckless, a gambler who toyed with the hopes of a nation at war. Either way, his words have already altered the course of debate, not just in Kyiv or Moscow, but in Washington, in NATO headquarters, in living rooms around the world. This is the power of political theater. A single statement can divide nations, inflame passions, and reshape elections. And Trump? He knows it. He's built his entire career on moments like this, moments where shock turns into conversation, and conversation turns into power. So we leave you with this. When history looks back at this moment, will it see a leader who spoke a bold truth before anyone else dared? Or a showman who once again bent the world to his script? The spotlight is on, the stage is set, and the final act hasn't even begun. Now it's your turn. Where do you stand? Was this Trump's genius move or a reckless gamble with global consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is far from over. And remember, sometimes the loudest words in politics aren't just headlines. They're turning points.